thank you for joining us. You are listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm your host, Daniel Davis. Joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today is our specialist in what we like to call hormone synergy. Actually, that's probably more of a term she created, so I'll let her elaborate more on that later. But anyway, what we're going to talk about today is how hormones actually affect brain chemistry, or let's say the lack of them, and sex and overall health. And she's going to talk with us today about what the importance is of having right hormone levels as we age, because sometimes those things just kind of dwindle, and how we can maintain those. Joining us on the program today is Dr. Catherine Retzler, and she's going to talk with us about this special synergy that we have with hormones and our body. And Catherine, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Thanks for having me, Daniel.
You seem so quiet today. Are you imbalanced?
No. I've been on your program several times talking about hormones and brain chemistry, but this is the first time that we're going to be visiting hormones, brain chemistry, and sex. And so that subject, of course, is a little bit intimidating, although, of course, very important.
Well, of course it is, because it seems that we have too much sex on the brain, and if the chemistry up there isn't working right, then I don't think anything else can.
It's true, yeah.
Now, let's talk about the importance about hormone levels. I remember attending one of your workshops, and I sat there just astounded thinking, we don't hear a whole lot about this, when you watch television and you see the news or you read newspapers or magazines. And if you do, it seems to be so buried, but it seems to be one of the most common sense approaches towards supporting not only healthy aging, but the ability to rebuild and just feel younger, like the age that you think you feel.
Right, that's very true, Daniel. And, as we age, our hormones decline, and aging accelerates as hormones decline. So very important to maintain proper hormone balance for optimal aging. And, the subject of sex, even though it's kind of something we all joke about, is actually really important to overall health. I know Daniel Amen, and you've interviewed him before, the pretty well-known psychiatrist who does a lot of work in the area of brain scans and brain optimization, has written a book called Sex and the Brain. And one of the things I appreciate about that book is he talks about all the health benefits of having a healthy sex life. And it's something you don't really think about, that, having a healthy sex life can improve mood. There's actually research on that showing that it can improve memory. People who have, a healthy, intimate life have fewer colds and flus because it increases something called secretory IgA, lower stress, improve fitness. So it's actually, there are health benefits to having an active and healthy sex life, which tends to decline with aging.
Now, let's talk about the hormones themselves and, what the important roles they play. Now, when you talk about how they slowly begin to dissipate, I remember you were describing a gentleman who was right around, I think it was his mid to maybe late 50s, give or take. And as he worked with you and you began to help him get back to what would be optimum normal levels for a person of his age, is that he described a sort of fog being removed, and you said it was like he was able to get his life back. Right.
Yeah, a lot of times the symptoms that come on when hormones decline, they tend to get dismissed as just normal signs of aging, especially in men. I'm not sure which patient you're referring to, but in men, a lot of times their symptoms will come on over time. So with women, they may have hot flashes and night sweats and mood swings, etc. But with men, it may take place over a period of time, and they may not be as aware of it. But hormones for men, specifically testosterone, are very important for normal brain function. I mean, we know that Alzheimer's disease is associated with a low testosterone level. Very important for the ability to build bone and muscle, for cardiovascular reasons, and that's an area that doesn't get talked about as much, but testosterone is very important for normal blood flow to the heart, and also for libido and for erectile function. The phosphodiesterase inhibiting drugs like Viagra and Cialis are being given out like candy now, and it's frustrating that testosterone deficiency isn't ruled out along with that. And commonly these men have low testosterone who need these need these drugs or need antidepressants, et cetera. And so, I'm not sure what your original question was, except for, it's pretty common for men to have hormone imbalance or for them to start having symptoms associated with that don't get looked at.
Mm-hmm. Well, the question went along the lines of how you were able to see, from your point of view, let's take a look at what your hormone levels are, what they should be at, and
right.
as you were able to help him achieve that optimum level, this was just a particular one some time ago, is that he felt like he gained his life back. It was almost
right.
as though it was tossed away and you gave it back to him, so to speak.
Yeah, people will often use phrases like, I feel like I'm a shell of myself.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I feel like I'm just walking around in blah. Like I just don't have the joy, the passion, the drive that I used to. So yeah, that's pretty common.
Yeah, so there's the key right there, is how they think about themselves. Mm-hmm. Now, let's talk about the relationship there of hormones and brain chemistry, because when those are low, then maybe your thought patterns begin to move in that direction, and then you start to believe these things. And this is where we can start.
Yeah, that's a good point. There is a relationship between hormones and neurotransmitters. Hormones, of course, are the substances produced by glands, and neurotransmitters are substances that are used in the brain. But there is hormone activity in the brain. So the hormone estrogen, for example, raises serotonin in the brain. So it's common for women to develop depression when their estrogen level goes down. And testosterone is very important to raise dopamine in the brain. And dopamine is the neurotransmitter that helps with focus. So it's not uncommon for men, as their testosterone declines, to not have the same ability to focus and become motivated and get things done that they used to. And that so there is a relationship with testosterone and dopamine. And that's actually part of how testosterone raises libido. Mm-hmm. Is that, having sex drive is associated with a normal testosterone level and dopamine release, because dopamine is involved in that pleasure reward cascade that happens in the brain. In fact, dopamine is involved in all of the reward-seeking behavior, whether it's sex or eating or risk-taking. It's the craving neurotransmitter. Unfortunately, when people have low dopamine, they can oftentimes crave things to try to raise that dopamine, like gambling, alcohol, drugs, or even pornography. So they're kind of self-medicating. But so a lot of times having a normal testosterone will normalize dopamine and actually help with some of those addictions or cravings, because it will help normalize that.
Boy, that's an interesting point of view, especially since we want to talk about sex and brain chemistry and why that's so important to have a healthy balance of that, is that you were just suggesting that because of lower levels of testosterone hormone levels, it creates an imbalance of the dopamine. So what people do is they find addictions to help increase that, right. And you suggested some of that. And that's an interesting way to approach that versus the way talk therapy, if you will suggest, well, let's take a look at your pattern in your history, when in fact it's more of a chemical imbalance that could be balanced.
Yeah, that's a good point, Daniel. And I work with a lot of psychologists and psychiatrists in the area, and I work with a couple of women who are well-known sex therapists. And there is definitely a role for talk therapy when it comes to psychological dysfunction in a relationship, and it's very important. I often talk about, doing psychological archaeology when it's not the most important or necessary at that time, as creating more problems than it cures. If there's, a hormone imbalance or a brain chemistry imbalance, you can go to therapy for years and not get to a place of actually, fixing the problem if it's a chemical problem. Now, on the other hand, I recently had a couple come in, and the gentleman's testosterone was one of the best I've actually ever seen. And they were having some libido issues, some intimacy issues in their relationship. So for them, it actually wasn't a hormone imbalance, and I sent them on appropriately to get counseling, whereas a lot of times the counselors will be referring to me because it's actually a hormone problem that needs to be treated. So it could be both. It's just knowing when to go where to get the help you need so that you don't end up making a bigger mess than you started with sometimes.
So talking about sex and aging now, why do you believe or think from your experience that there seems to be a decline in sex with aging?
Yeah, there is a decline in sex with aging. I mean, most people will identify with that. Libido decreases, the frequency of intercourse decreases, men can develop erectile problems, women can develop vaginal dryness, and even orgasm frequency and quality change. That's something that doesn't get talked about a lot unless you're in clinical practice and you hear patients say, my orgasms just aren't the same, or I can't have them, and I used to be fine, so I know it's not a psychological problem. And honestly, the hormone that's most important in that case is testosterone, because testosterone enables people to have orgasms, both women and men, and a lot of times if their testosterone is brought back up into a healthy range, that problem is alleviated. But there are a lot of changes that happen in the brain when people age that are also associated with, lack of sex or lack of sex drive, because the brain is the largest sex organ. The brain is where orgasms happen. The brain is where the chemicals of desire activate certain areas, and there's a decrease in the size and the activity of the brain as people age. So, Daniel Amen again talks about this in his book, that, making sure your brain is healthy is very important to a healthy sex life, besides, the hormone issue.
Now, Catherine, not too long on our program, too long ago, we featured a gentleman who has been in the pharmaceutical industry for more than 30 years, both in being involved with it directly and indirectly as someone who writes and talks quite a bit about what it is and its practices. And he was talking about a new book that he wrote about the pharmaceutical industry and a particular drug that was available but then was pulled off the shelf because of the tremendous bad side effects that it was creating, even leading up to death. But what I found interesting in this book was it actually had a very fascinating history of pharmaceutical companies and the like. But one of the things that he introduced in the book, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's almost as if the pharmaceutical industry itself coined the disease, the sickness, if you will, which was called erectile dysfunction, which is typically what they do, and then they introduce something that'll help you with that. Now, is this just a sort of a semi-new term that's been coined, or is this a real, true phenomenon, I guess, for lack of a better word, that's always been with men?
That's a good question. I'm not sure about the politics in terms of the pharmaceutical industry creating that as a term, but erectile dysfunction is a very medical condition.
Okay.
In a way, the introduction of the drugs like Viagra and Cialis have enabled men to be more open about it, because and it may be psychological in origin, in which case those drugs may or may not be effective because there is a placebo response if it's psychological, but lack of blood flow definitely can contribute to erectile dysfunction, and low testosterone can contribute to erectile dysfunction. And for men, this is a big deal. I mean, a lot of men can become very embarrassed about it. They don't consider it a medical issue. They think it's their fault. So in a way, I'm grateful to have options. And I use those drugs sparingly. And frankly, my experience is most men don't want to have to rely on those drugs if they can optimize their testosterone and work on psychological issues, and also work on optimizing their overall health, because if they've got diabetes, if they've got atherosclerosis, they're going to have decreased blood flow to that area, and that's going to affect erections too. So it's not just about giving a drug or even giving testosterone. Sometimes a whole lifestyle change has to happen for somebody to be able to cure that condition. But I think it's a very real condition. I think, men with erectile problems, I have to ask most of the time. They don't offer that, and So I think it's a very real condition. I don't know about the politics that gentleman's book talks about. Certainly, there wasn't the incidence of depression before the SSRIs came out, and now people recognize it, and we could talk for hours about what is real depression versus, what
perceived
is
depression, sure.
Yeah, or the fact that those drugs have such a high placebo rate, meaning, well, people can get themselves out of it without the drugs. And the same is true for Cialis and Viagra. There's at least a 20% placebo rate on those. Some studies show even more. So, erectile dysfunction may or may not be, quote, real for all men, but it is for many men.
Now, from a psychological point of view, in your experience, when we talk about something like erectile dysfunction, now women, as you were talking about, as they age, tend to feel more of the dryness. Now, psychologically speaking, how does that affect their sex drive and their thoughts and their beliefs?
That's a great question, Daniel.
You're the one coming up with these things that make me think of these questions. I really, I think overall, because as you were talking about men and erectile dysfunction, how they won't disclose that, it's because I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems in our celebrity-focused society, it's about performance, the man who measures up. And so when an average guy, if he considers himself that, thinks, man, I'm just not measuring up to something like this. What's wrong with me,
Right.
You begin to see how sex and the idea of perhaps substituting it with pornography, if you will, is there, because then they don't have to worry about the fear of rejection, the fear of measuring up. And so you see how that plays in. It's the same way with women as they age and they're feeling, am I desirable?
Absolutely. That's actually a really good point. So the first part of your question was more about vaginal dryness and how it affects women, but the second part is even more interesting, which is, as we age, as women age, we start to develop, wrinkles, our skin changes because estrogen declines, our mood may change because of hormone decline, estrogen and testosterone. We can gain weight, especially when testosterone declines, because testosterone is very important for lean body mass in women. And so we start to feel differently about the way we look. And then without adequate testosterone, we don't have the libido that we used to have when our testosterone level was in a healthy range. So we don't feel as physically attractive, but then we also don't have, sex on the brain. We don't have that libido. And then if you complicate that with health concerns like vaginal dryness and vaginal atrophy, which can be very uncomfortable, of course there's not going to be much of a desire there for one's partner. And then what's going on for the male in the relationship, if he's got erectile problems and if his testosterone goes down, he may not think about sex at all. And so now you've got two people who they don't have an intimate life as much anymore, and some people not at all. And the thing that I like to point out about that, and why I do think that sex is a very healthy thing to have in a relationship, is that it's really easy to find fault with your partner when you're not intimate. Because, you start digging stuff up, whereas when you're being intimate, you tend to be more loving. And part of that is actually related to brain chemistry. Mm-hmm. After orgasm, the brain releases something called oxytocin, and oxytocin is the bonding hormone. It's the cuddle hormone. It makes you fall in love with your partner. So if you're not releasing that brain chemical, and dopamine plays a role in that too, if you're not releasing those brain chemicals, you don't have that same attachment to your partner. And that's actually necessary to keep that relationship strong. Mm-hmm. So it's really an important thing to maintain in a relationship and not get complacent about it and actually treat it. I don't know if we're going to medicalize sex, but it certainly makes sense to, talk about it at least and see if you can optimize it and keep it healthy. Keep your sex life healthy as you age.
Keep it exciting as well.
Keep it exciting, yes.
Now let's talk about health benefits of sex. I mean, first, the biggest one is the euphoria. It just feels great. And
that's true. The opiates, yep, that's true.
Uh-huh.
We talked about a few of those health benefits that that Daniel Amen has put in his book about improving memory and mood, so helping with the brain, fitness, if you want to look at the calories burned during sex. Increasing testosterone and DHEA, actually, after orgasm, testosterone goes down, but then it can go back up. So it may play a role in helping optimize hormones. We don't know which comes first. And then, of course, the psychological benefits of being more attached to your partner and being happier overall. Happier people tend to have sex, and having sex tends to make you happier. So.
Yeah, especially if anybody's ever seen the movie Big with Tom Hanks. The first time he has sex, he's still a boy, but in a man's body. Comes to work, he's got a smile that he just can't get rid of. All of a sudden he wants coffee. His step is a little faster. And that's what we all want to get back, I think.
Yes, the fun. The fun and the newness. I mean, anything new will raise dopamine. And dopamine, again, it lights up that reward circuitry of the brain, the pleasure center of the brain. So new things will raise that. That's why surprises can be so sexy, or changing something about your relationship. I mean, something new is always going to start that cascade going and help with the healthy sex life. And then, again, oxytocin. This is my new favorite hormone that I love learning about because, the other day my husband was saying several times during the day, "You look so nice, you look so pretty," and I looked at him and I said, "Oh, that's just the oxytocin talking." All of a sudden he started noticing me, and I hadn't really changed much, But it's a
But women do want to be noticed that by their partners as well. They want to be appreciated. And I'll tell you, it's interesting, Catherine, because you lead me to something else, is that as men approach midlife, generally this seems to be either the reality or the cliche, is, okay, well, you've been married to this woman now anywhere from 5 to 10 to maybe 20 years. The next thing you know, it's about to end in divorce because she's found him having an affair, and I guess with the younger woman. And you think to yourself, okay, now what was missing there that he went off somewhere else? And I know some of it may be a proponent of psychology, but I'm just talking about hopefully what seemed to be we fell in love first healthy relationship.
Right. There is actually a phenomenon called the Coolidge Effect, and it's been shown in all species that when the male of the species is introduced to a new female, the male will continue to perform sexually. So, and this is true in humans. So it's really important to maintain that newness in a relationship. And what you're talking about is also a matter of priority. If the intimate aspect of our relationships is a priority, then we find ways to make sure it continues and make sure we're connecting. We don't get complacent about it because it's a priority. But that priority slips, either for women or men, it's very easy for the partner to go looking elsewhere because we need that. Sex is a need, and feeling seen and intimate is a need. So that's really a matter of priority, saying, oh, well, somebody bringing it up. We haven't been intimate in a while. This is a priority for me. What can we do? Or just, thinking of a surprise or whatever, buying new lingerie, whatever. But it's really a matter of priority. So it's easy, I think, when it's not a priority to go looking elsewhere and think the problem is the relationship. And it may not be the relationship. Again, that's where doing psychological archaeology and just digging stuff up, we can always find stuff. We can find stuff wrong with ourselves, our partner, the relationship, but it depends on what the perspective is. If you had something there to begin with, I often recommend couples who are struggling, wait until let's get your hormones balanced, and then if you still want to, move in the direction of being apart, that makes sense, but there was something there to begin with. It may be a hormone problem, it may be a brain chemistry problem, it may be a priority issue, but let's see if we can get that back before you call it quits.
Because it is true sometimes. I've even heard this in conversations where the one partner is kind of feeling like they're swaying in a different direction, they want to do something different, and then the partner of that partner says, well, is it me? And they say with all conviction and sincerity, I believe, genuineness is, No, it really isn't. It's really totally me. I just don't know what that is. you know, and please don't feel like you're lesser or anything like that. I just don't know what it is. And you can see the correlation, as we've been talking about, between just having healthy biochemistry hormone levels and that connection with the brain. And as you talk about having a continuing way of newness within the relationship, if that's really a true priority that you want to have, that, I want this to work, I want to be with you sexually as well, I want to feel desirable towards you, the whole bit, you could just see how it all interplays with itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting point. Yeah.
I keep coming up with them. I don't know how it happens every time I'm with you. Now, here's something that's really interesting. Let's say that we begin to see a rift in a relationship with a couple. They went from having sex, I guess, as I understand, some healthy norms are 2 to 3 times a week. For some couples, it could be a lot more than that. But as that dwindles, you start seeing it once a week, maybe once every couple of weeks, maybe even once a month. And these could truly possibly be the physical phenomenon that we're talking about that directly relates to the brain starting to become more and more comfortable with that complacency. Right. Then all of a sudden they decide to turn this around because they realize on a physical level these things such as balancing and raising your hormone levels to normal levels are an essential thing that needs to happen, and they start to feel that desire come back. Then you think of the thought process of maybe the guilt that could be inherent and how you can get that healthy sex life back where both people appreciate it very much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of things couples can do. The story that you just pointed out is, first and foremost acknowledging that there's a problem and having the commitment to do something about it, to turn it around. Usually if a couple comes in to see me or an individual, that couple, the first thing I do is test their hormones. And also, of course, talk to them about what their idea of a healthy sex life is, because I've been surprised before at women saying, well, I just don't have the libido, and they're having sex 5 times a week. And I'm like, well, do you enjoy it? Well, yes. Well, I don't feel like my husband, though. And I'm like, oh, well, he has 10 times the testosterone you do, so you can't compare yourself that way. But so talking about what a healthy sex life means to that person and how it's become unhealthy is important. And if it seems like there's some deep-seated psychological issues going on, then, of course, enlisting the help of a sex therapist who can sort of tease those things out and give that person some resources. But then, I think it's also really important to focus on improving brain function to help with that sex drive. So, there's a lot of things that people can do. One of my favorite recommendations is something that has been shown to increase something called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF. And you're going to be hearing more about this because of the incidence of dementia and Alzheimer's and the need to increase this substance, BDNF, to make newer neurons, make new connections, increase brain neuron survival. But one of my favorite recommendations to increase BDNF is something that you don't even have to buy. It's absolutely free, and that is exercise. Exercise has been shown to increase BDNF and help with brain function and with sex drive. So really important to prioritize exercise. Love also has been shown to increase BDNF. Affirmations, vitamin D has been shown to increase BDNF. So, making sure that you're taking care of your brain in that way. Eating a healthy diet, eating plenty of fish oil, because the brain is made up of a great deal of EPA and DHA that's in fish oil. Making sure things are new. All these things are so important for that couple to get their sex life back. So it's not a one pill type, Viagra prescription that's going to turn things around for both of them. I've heard recently that they're even talking about giving Viagra to women. I'm just like, oh no. Give them testosterone.
Will they ever stop trying to sell us things? What's interesting, Catherine, is that we've done many talks, both with you and other people in the health and wellness community, and very well-respected professionals and even up to and leading to celebrities. And one particular one we had on our program was Suzanne Summers, and I actually spoke quite a bit about your area of expertise, and she's a huge proponent on what you do.
Great.
And what I've been amazed about is, and this is to the listeners out there, that as we've been listening to, thank God it's over with, this last presidential campaign, one of the big concerns is about universal health care. And what I find fascinating about everything we've ever talked about on this program is how inexpensive it really truly is to be healthy.
That is a great point, Daniel. That is a really great point. It's not about spending $5,000 a month on drugs or supplements. It's really about the basics. Eating a healthy diet, exercising, maintaining a positive attitude. I'm reading this great book now called A Complaint-Free World. Have you heard of this book?
I don't think I have. It sounds interesting.
Oh, it's great. This pastor came up with this idea for his church of wearing purple bracelets as a reminder that what you focus on expands, and that if you're positive and loving instead of critical and complaining, that's what you'll get in your life. And when you catch yourself complaining or gossiping or being critical, you have to switch the band to the other arm as a way to anchor you toward remembering your commitment. And he challenges people to take a 21-day commitment for not complaining in their life. And they've given out over 5 million of these bands now, all over the world. People are wanting this. And I'm thinking, this is brilliant. I'm going to start prescribing this to my patients because, again, what you focus on expands. I think it is so important even in terms of health care, that if you've got health concerns, you address them, but you don't create them and make them worse by focusing on them and complaining about them. And this is huge. So I'm really excited about this new concept of a complaint-free world and these purple bands. Everyone listening, I acknowledge you to read, or I recommend you read that book.
Very good. And, again, like I said, we've had so many programs about health and wellness that people don't need insurance other than what it really should be used for. And I think that's one of the biggest problems in our society today, is they take a look at insurance as though, I'll just let myself go, but I've got insurance to cover me when I go to the doctor. And I'm thinking, well, no, that's not the way it works.
Right.
The way it is for anything that, expands beyond your financial means, perhaps maybe you break a couple of legs or something like that. That's what it's there for, is emergencies only. And if people would just start taking the driver's seat, and that's what we love about bringing on our program, is ways you can do that. It's so extremely affordable that actually eating is more expensive than maintaining your health.
Right. And food is medicine. It's information. It tells your cells what to do. So, I think this conversation is going in a really interesting direction, because we don't accept insurance at my office. I would have to raise my fees and hire somebody if I were to accept insurance. So a few years ago, I decided not to be part of that whole scheme anymore. And, I still help patients get reimbursed if we can, and we use the insurance for the lab work. But really, the insurance companies have become in charge of what I can and cannot do with my patients. And
believe me, in my experience, I know that.
Oh, yeah.
It's amazing what they tell you can do.
Prevention and treating the whole picture, and there's no ICD-9 code for that, or there's no CPT code for that. So people really need to invest in their health, and sometimes it does cost money, but it's money well spent, as opposed to waiting until there's a lot of health care problems that now the insurance company does kick in to help fix. Do you know what I mean?
I know it's interesting when you see out there this day and age, for instance, people are always finding nutritional supplementation, and somebody will come along and they may have one of these berry juices that probably really actually helps and works. And they say, here, this does all this. The person gets excited and they say, well, how much is it? Well, this will be about $35. And I'm thinking, you hear them actually say, well, that sounds expensive. And I'm thinking, as opposed to what? You getting cancer?
Well, when you're
just the way people think.
Yeah, well, when your insurance company covers, a month of Zoloft and your copay is $15, what you don't see is that they're kicking in $50 or $100 a month, and that's where people don't think about the cost of health care. It's because they just look at what their little copay is or what their little copay to go to the doctor is, but they don't see the true cost of that health care, you know? Such an interesting, we have a whole new topic here, Daniel.
Well, you know, it happens when you start getting the sex drive in, we kind of move in a whole new direction, don't we? Now, even though we're about to run short on some time here, let's talk about when people come and they talk to you about sex. What are some common conversations when they start feeling a little more comfortable about it?
Well, oftentimes women are the first people to come to me before their husbands, and the women tend to be very open about their sex lives. They, if there's no sex drive, they tend to admit that, and oftentimes they'll say, "There's no sex drive from my husband, but he doesn't want to do anything about it." But they're very open about that. They'll talk about the inability to have orgasms sometimes, or the feelings like they're kind of cut off from their body, or they literally don't have the feeling they used to. And they'll talk about vaginal atrophy, and they'll talk about, you know, lack of sleep. Hey, if you're not sleeping and you're tired, you're going to choose sleep over sex any day, as you should. So, you know, if there's a hormone imbalance that's causing the sleep deprivation, then that has to get corrected. They'll talk about all of that. And men will often, they may admit to low libido and erectile problems, but they tend to not see it as a problem, or they see it as something that they should be able to fix. I noticed that about men. It's that, well, yeah, you know, I've got no libido, but it's because blah, blah, blah. Like, they feel like it's their fault. And I'll say, well, were you like that when you were in your 20s? Well, no. You know?
When we were in our 20s, it was way different, boy, I'll tell you.
Right. Well, you know, I'm married. I have a husband, and let me tell you, when he gets his testosterone pellets, he starts to notice me again. I mean, I look different to him as opposed to when he doesn't. So, and I like that. That works for me, you know.
Reminds me of that scene in the movie Chocolate when she gave those particular chocolates to the one lady, and the husband kind of ate them by accident. Before you know it, he's in the bathroom looking at her, and she started rushing back. Can I get some more of that? You know?
Hey, chocolate actually has a high degree of brain chemical called phenylethylamine in it, which can stimulate sexual feelings and love. So it's kind of interesting that chocolate is high in PEA, and your PEA level goes up when you first fall in love and tends to go down after about 2 years. You ever notice the relationship changes a little bit after 2 years?
Absolutely, yeah.
I don't think it's a coincidence that we give chocolate on Valentine's Day either, so eat dark chocolate.
Don't become diabetic, but eat that chocolate, absolutely.
Dark chocolate, yeah.
That's great. See, we're coming up with all these natural ways to avoid ever taking Viagra, because it's almost as though once you have Viagra in your house, you're screaming, "Look, I've got erectile dysfunction. I'm less than worthy." We're not talking about that, Sir Lancelot. Let's go ahead and get that jousting going here, that kind of thing. So, you know, always a pleasure to have you on the program, Catherine. For those of you tuning in, we're talking with Catherine Retzler about hormone synergy and the beauty and the emotional and the physical wonderment of what sex can do even as you age. Now, what is the oldest you've heard of people still having sexual activity in their lives?
Oh, I have patients in their 70s who have healthy sex lives. Yep. And you know, I think something happens when you reach that age where you just tend to not care what people think. So they're open to talking about it, and I just love them. I love them to death when they come in.
Yeah, I know what you mean. You know, there was one day, you know, I was visiting my grandparents. I was like, "Could you guys put a robe on, please?" You know.
There's a certain appropriate line, isn't there, on grandparents?
No, but the thing about it is you think that after you're done in our youth-celebrated culture, by the time you're in your 30s, you're a senior citizen. And, you know, it's like, what do you got to look forward to? And I say to myself, and I say to other people, look, women, there's something about them as they get older that gets actually more exciting if you can just learn to see and appreciate that. And the same thing with men, is that wisdom, that idea that we are perhaps 17 inside, we feel that way, although we may not look that way, but it's possible to achieve those levels at any age. So it gives you something to really look forward to.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, Catherine, why don't you go ahead and give out a website so people can find out more information about how to have the sex drive them all the way to their horizon into the later years.
The website for our clinic is laurelhurstintegrativehealth.com, and the website for my lectures is hormonesynergy.com.
Very good.
And
Well,
we
Catherine,
have a seminar coming up in January.
very good. I'm sure that we'll attend that and get excited again. Just attending these lectures, I'm telling you, folks, will get you sexually excited.
Daniel, you are welcome anytime.
Well, Catherine, thank you again for being on the Beyond 50 radio program.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
You
okay.
bet. Take care.
Bye-bye.
I'll tell you, so there it is, folks. Sex at any age. It's just about a return to desire. Sometimes I think that same thing myself, and that's probably a whole different subject. Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to visit us at our website, beyond50radio.com, with the number 50 with a 50. And be sure to sign up for our free weekly e-newsletter, and that comes out by email every single week. Find out a lot of great resources, multimedia. It's great. It's all there for you, because aging doesn't have to be something that just happens. It's something that you can learn to enjoy. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for tuning in. You've been listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. And remember, live your day past halfway.